Going by the current political rhetoric, it seems to be a matter of when, not if, there will be a referendum to amend the country's constitution and change the system of government. And so far, two proposals have been put forth. Raila Odinga's proposal for a largely parliamentary system with a ceremonial president, a prime minister, and two deputy premiers, and Deputy President William Ruto's 6-point proposal bearing the return of the position of leader of opposition. So, prime minister or leader of opposition? The aftermath of the divisive 2017 election gave birth to clamor for yet another push to change the country's supreme law. To date, the push for constitutional changes has seen two main proposals floated for Kenyans to debate and consider.
Pande hii ya katiba ipige msasa, tutapiga msasa. Mwingine apende, asipende. Kwa hivyo mtu asianze kutisha wa Kenya ati hatutaki referendum, hatutaki nini? Nani amekwambia referendum?
During the 2018 devolution conference in Kakamega, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga proposed what sounded like a parliamentary system of government. And 2 weeks ago, Deputy President William Ruto, who had previously kept his cards close to his chest, spoke at the historic Chatham House in London, where he seemed to rubbish the dual executive system, which has a president and prime minister.
The national government should be reconfigured to comprise the national executive headed by the president and the official opposition headed by the leader of the party or coalition of parties whose presidential candidate wins the second highest votes. That is good for accountability. And secondly, it removes or mitigates the winner-take-all perception.
So which system best addresses the problem of lack of inclusivity in Kenyan politics?
The necessity of having a leader for official opposition leading their troops right from the August House itself is very important in terms of scaling up our approaches to accountability and holding the executive to account.
Political scientist Barak Muluka believes none of the two systems upholds democracy in the real sense of the word.
It does not, because democracy is not about putting a few people in positions of authority in government. Democracy and inclusion is about including the nation, everybody in the nation, within the opportunities that are there in the country.
The 2010 constitution that replaced Kenya's independence document ushered in a purely presidential system, something that Odinga and his political allies accepted quite reluctantly. Odinga has been pushing for a parliamentary system with an elected president who would be basically ceremonial and a deputy, as well as an appointed prime minister who would be head of government and two deputies.
You are hearing that those who are defeated in the elections should not be left in the cold, and therefore that the creation of some of the positions that we have heard about would be about accommodating them. And therefore it starts becoming intriguing in the sense that how would you then have a prime minister possibly coming from an opposition party that has lost?
If the principally parliamentary system was in place in the 2017 election, chances are that both the president and prime minister would have come from the Jubilee party.
Then still would have Uhuru Kenyatta as president, William Ruto as his deputy. They would have picked some other person within the ranks of Jubilee party as prime minister and as deputy prime minister for the two slots.
No amount of institutional reform will better our lives. Elections come and go, but Kenya remains.
Political scientists believe the all-important Building Bridges initiative could be tasked with drafting a big part of the referendum question, making the looming vote even more divisive.
Sometimes you get the impression that it's a team that is going to come back to the country and report some choreographed and rehashed matters, which then the country may be invited to ratify by way of a referendum.
On his part, Deputy President William Ruto supports the retention of the presidential system as is, with the President and Deputy President elected in a joint ticket and preserving all the trappings of power. He also wants specific duties laid out for the Deputy President, who he proposes to lead government business in Parliament. Ruto then calls for the position of Leader of Opposition to be brought back.
The leader of the party which becomes second becomes the leader of the opposition, and with his or her running mate automatically becomes members of Parliament and assume the leadership of official opposition.
If Kenya had this format in the last election, analysts believe there would be no Building Bridges initiative, and the National Super Alliance, NASA, would be more effective in checking the executive.
Raila Odinga would be the official leader of opposition, and he would be sitting in Parliament. And actually, they would be thoroughly checkmating the Jubilee administration and the executive on how they execute their mandate and holding them to account. Today, ODM or even the entire coalition of NASA is not checkmating the Jubilee administration. They're in bed. Ekuru Aukot, who today is acting as the leader of the official opposition leader, he is not in Parliament today, and they do not have the weight and the numbers in Parliament that can even check and hold the Jubilee administration to account.
To the extent that the leader of opposition sits in the highest council in the land, which would be the cabinet, I do not agree. The people in cabinet and government should be given the opportunity to sit down, reflect through their policies, their programs, and bring them out to Parliament for them to be tested and processed. And if they survive in Parliament, to be given the opportunity to be tested through implementation. Meanwhile, the opposition must maintain a studious watchdog role.
There is a school of thought that suggests that a change of government structures in any shape or form would make Uhuru Kenyatta a lame duck president sooner rather than later.
The moment the referendum call is embraced fully, then even Uhuru Kenyatta himself and his now new brother, Raila Odinga, will not have any time to help him advance the Big Four agenda. And Uhuru Kenyatta therefore risks finishing his second term as president, having achieved little, if any, on the front of his focus ideas of the Big Four agenda.
The issue of presidential term limits has also been thrown into the debate, with a suggestion from some Jubilee quarters for what has been termed as the Putin model. The Putin model refers to the famous power-switching moves between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev. Putin succeeded Russia's first president Boris Yeltsin, serving as president from the year 2000 to 2004, before being re-elected in March 2004 and serving his second term until 2008, when the constitution barred him from a third consecutive term. Medvedev was then elected president, and a day later Putin was appointed prime minister. 4 years later, in 2012, the chess game continued as Putin was elected president and Medvedev returned to the position of prime minister. And in 2018, Putin was re-elected for a fourth term that will keep him at the Kremlin until 2024. But just how practical is it for President Kenyatta to emulate the Putin model here in Kenya?
For anyone to even start toying with things like an individual who has exercised power at the highest level should be reinvented and repackaged for purposes of power exercising in a new guise, I think that is shameful. And if people are really sincere that they want to drive this country and steer it away from the direction of chaos, then that is one thought that they should not contemplate.
While many Kenyans yearn for a constitutional debate that puts their interests at the forefront, they may have to first decide on whether they prefer a purely presidential system, a parliamentary one, or a blend of both. And proposals by political arch-rivals will definitely set the stage for the debate and its impact in the run-up to 2022. Ben Kitili, KTN News.